Hey everybody, we got Matt Workman on with us today at the Big League Film School show. Hey Matt, say hello to everybody.
Hey guys.
We got you on today because basically you're going to be one of the presenters at the CineSummit, the Big League CineSummit, which is going to be on January 20th. And you had such an awesome talk where we laser focus in on one go-to kind of camera move that the greats use often, and I love that. I love the presentation. You're going to show us how we can do it with very simple equipment all the way up to the techno crane. And I wanted to bring you on today and to discuss a little bit more in general camera movement, because as we were talking on our own, there was so much that you brought to the table. So first of all, again, welcome. Thank you for making the time, and I'm looking forward to getting into this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to January 20th for the event to watch the other presenters, and I'm really happy with the presentation we put together where we talk about camera movement.
Yeah, so today, what I like to do, I mean, they're going to obviously have to hang tight for that presentation, but today, let's talk a little bit about camera movement in general. I know you were telling me that basically camera movement can be a little bit overlooked today, and you were well, I'll let you take over. Why don't you tell me what you're hearing, what you have to say about that, and what you were saying other big time, top end DPs were telling you about how camera movement is perhaps overlooked today.
Yeah, well, as I was coming up as a cinematographer, and even today, I've always looked and reached out to, senior cinematographers that I've looked up to, and I asked them their advice, and really their opinions are, really important to me. And something that was common that they all said was that because of the modern cameras like the Alexa and the Epic, they have much higher ISOs, so you can basically get, an exposure. You can photograph pretty much in any environment, and you can get a usable image. And that's freed up cinematography in a lot of ways, but it's also one of the negative effects of it is that people have started to lose focus on composition. A lot of senior cinematographers are telling me that like if they watch the up and coming work and the lighting is good and that sort of thing, but the composition is really lacking. And I think it is due to the fact that you can basically frame anything, whereas previously, even though I don't want to go back to the system, that if you're working with 50 or 100 ASA film stock, you put up a frame. If you wanted to see what was in the frame, you had to put light on it, and because of that, you had to really concentrate on the composition. Everything was a big decision with what you're going to put light on. So with that in mind, I've always, since hearing that, I've had a renewed interest in composition, and I look to the greats like Roger Deakins, like Darius Kanji and Harris Vias, and the people that I really look up to. And I'm really am mindful of studying their work. And something that was recently in the news with, I think it was Hollywood Reporter did the Cinematographers Roundtable. If you haven't seen that, you should definitely go check that out. And Deakins, BB, and, a whole bunch of other, really top-notch DPs, they're all having this conversation about their latest movies. And one of the interesting things that came up was that they were all talking about lighting, and someone mentioned that, but framing and composition is the most important thing. And everyone basically nodded. They were like, yeah, of course, that's the foundation. And I think, just watching that once through, you may not catch that. You might be listening more about
Right.
a specific lighting technique or like the newest camera technology. But one of the big things I took away was that really the fundamentals of storytelling as a director and a DP is framing, like the 5 C's of cinematography. Composition is really big. And so, with that, for the presentation I do for the Big League CineSummit, we take one example and we really go into the different ways of covering it. And if I could I'll show an example right now of a camera move from Mr. Roger Deakins' latest film. This is from Unbroken, and I took this from a trailer. And we're watching it go through, and so what you're seeing is the main character slides in, and I guess we don't see his face, and then the camera takes off right behind him. And it seems pretty straightforward, but if you really think through the beats of what he's trying to tell in the story, is that we're starting on the ground, we introduce this character who's obviously in a hurry, and then we're chasing after him, and it's a really interesting shot, and the composition works. And I think a good way to break down the shot is that you can think of this as a static shot,
Right.
and then this running shot is another shot, and he's linked them together with this camera move. And I actually went and found the behind the scenes of how they accomplished this shot, which is even more incredible. For what it seems like kind of a basic shot, there's a lot that goes into this. And the thing that makes this particular move difficult is that it starts static and then takes off. And that's very difficult to do in camera. It can be very shaky. It can just be like a mess. Like if you try to do this, you know, or if you've done these kind of shots, you know it's very difficult to take off smoothly. So what you're seeing here is this jib arm, and at the end is a stabilized Scorpio head that's isolating a lot of the the low frequency noise and the high frequency noise, honestly. And this whole thing is on an electric car that's basically taking off really quickly. And it's and I think what's important is how he's using the camera movement to tell the story. It's really easy to get lost in like, oh, should I use a Movi? We've got sliders, we've got Steadicam, we've got this drones. There's just so many ways to move a camera. But what's really important at the end of the day when you're moving the camera is why you're doing it, and how do you tell the story with it.
Right, and that's one of the things in the your presentation, the CineSummit, that we're really focused on is why move the camera. What is it that it's doing? What is it that it's accomplishing when you do a certain camera movement? So there's many different approaches, right? You can do it in more than one way, which is one of the things that you show us in that. Do you find that people are moving the camera often just because they can with all the crazy tools that there are today?
I think that it's not so much in the final work. I think when you see something on Vimeo or in the theaters or on by the time it makes air, the editors have chosen the parts that work. But the reason I put together this presentation and the points I put together is to kind of give a structure to filmmakers that are maybe struggling to figure out when to move the camera and why. And then even beyond that is like, how do you do it? Like, what are the options? And like, what's the difference between a techno-crane move versus a dolly versus just a tripod? Like, what are what are some examples to really get your feet wet, to really kind of understand what those different tools do when it comes to moving the camera.
Right.
So what I'm showing here is actually the demo from the presentation. We're not going to give away too much, but I wanted to run through the different examples.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll just let this play in the background right now. So this first example, we're covering a scene with just a tripod, and you see that it cuts and tilts. And we'll talk more about that and what's happening. After that, we go into talking about what the scene feels like with a dolly, and what a dolly can do for you, where you're basically moving the camera, and how it affects how it feels.
Right.
And then finally, we go into kind of the biggest, most Hollywood way of moving a camera, Michael Bay, Steven Spielberg style, with a techno crane, and you can see how that affects the camera move. And I think the takeaway isn't so much that like, oh, you need a crane, you need a dolly. It's just giving a structure to how you use camera movement to tell a story. And
well, there was two things that I really loved. There's one that you can accomplish it in more than one way. You could do it with just a tripod. You could do it with a dolly, and you could do it with a techno crane. You can do it with all three ways. Obviously, the more higher up you go in that ranking, the more extravagant it becomes. And then another thing that you talk about also in the presentation is that we discuss how you don't necessarily have to have a techno crane. You can kind of fake it maybe with the Movi, maybe with the crane that's it doesn't have to be necessarily the techno crane, but maybe a different kind of crane, a simpler kind of crane that everybody has access to. One point that I want to kind of hammer home that we said in this quick discussion here on camera movement, but I want to really nail it a little bit harder because I don't want it to go overlooked, is that when you think cinematography, high-end cinematography, I'm sure I'm guilty as others. We think lighting all day long, lighting. And I'm sure it does need to go way up there, maybe at the top, as much as camera movement. But you were pointing out that the camera movement is getting so overlooked, and that everybody at that round table agreed that even with the greatest lighting, if your composition is no good, and you were mentioning before, when we were talking, that basically camera movement is from composition to composition. I love that. I mean, if you could speak on that, I mean that it should go up there just as high of a point as the lighting is considered.
Yeah, and I think a lot of cinematographers know that, but I think it's nice to hear it out loud. When you approach your typical set, you're going to rehearse it with the actors, and then you're gonna kind of find the camera angles, and that's important just to really reiterate. That's like you find the angles first usually, and then you would light based on the blocking, and something that a lot of senior cinematographers have told me over time, and it makes more and more sense, as you continue your career, that lighting is composition. If you consider like a room that's evenly lit, for instance, and then you frame up on it, lighting is to, you use lighting usually to direct focus. So if it's all flat lit, for instance, it's hard to tell. It's maybe a little bit disoriented. Like, what am I supposed to look at? So you would cut that off the background. You would add more to the main character, for instance. So that, composition and lighting are very much the same thing in the end, the effect, of what you're doing. But I think what is sometimes overlooked is that the composition comes first. Like if you're in a medium, the lighting is probably different than if you're in extreme close-up or an extreme wide. I mean, in certain cases, you might just light the whole room, and that's a style of cinematography, and you just kind of let what happens. But a lot of the times, especially in commercial or feature films, you're framing first. You're going to figure out the camera move first, and then the lighting is to help, create an environment for that move. So that's part of the reason I really focus on the camera movements and composition.
Sweet. Let's end it with that. I mean, a lot of little gems there, and I hope everybody gets to attend and see your presentation as well as everybody else's. We have a whole lot of people on there. But Matt, thanks for coming on. Thanks for bringing that to us. Everybody, we will see you at the CineSummit. I'm sure everybody's going to want to see your presentation. Thanks again, Matt, and take it easy.
Cool, pleasure.